what's that move that leaders make when they begin to integrate more fully and more wholly all of what they have to bring? Those elements that perhaps got wrapped in reactive tendencies, or maybe even that they weren't necessarily celebrated for early in life. Maybe they learned their lesson and had their hands slapped and no, you can't be doing that as a leader. And they decided, well, for the next 20 years, I'll go ahead and put that aside. And, one of the things that's been most fun in both working with leaders, but also just in our conversations, is this kind of idea of how do you unlock that? How do you begin to sort of walk back in the totality of what you have to offer? I'd love for you to say maybe just a little bit about, how have you been thinking about that? And what are some of the ideas that have been bubbling up for you in terms of this idea of reclaiming wholeness?
The reframe that adult development, leadership development, how I deploy myself into circumstance is actually more about conscious leadership than it is necessarily about creative leadership. And that's not to say that creative leadership isn't great and utile and extraordinarily correlated with business performance and business results. But it's the tool of consciousness that allows you to know what needs to be done in any given moment. That difference between it's about conscious leadership or it's about creative or reactive leadership, which I'm not at, or that sort of thing, is the big aha that I have been watching unfold.
Yeah. Well, this idea that creative leadership is a pathway back to consciousness, right? That in a
Yes.
sense,
Yeah.
it's a set of capabilities, beliefs, behaviors that lend themselves towards a more thoughtful and conscious take. And I agree. I love what you say about and in fact, the leadership circle where both of us are familiar with, that actually in its sort of mission is this idea of the conscious practice of leadership. It's not the creative practice of leadership, although, yay for creative. I think it's actually a really effective way to get back there. But the whole thing is about how do I become more intentional, more purpose-driven, more collaborative, more relational, more courageous, but all of that in a more fully conscious way, where less and less sort of my habits are running the show, or old tendencies. And boy, I don't know that well, maybe there are some people in the world who can claim sort of full consciousness, but what I suspect for us mere mortals is it's a constant forgetting and remembering, right? Like you
Absolutely.
go unconscious and you're like, oh, wait a minute. What am I doing here?
And my experience is the most conscious leaders are actually really aware of the fact that they can't always be conscious, right? Or if they can, maybe they don't have an environment around them that is particularly volatile or ambiguous, that they're just kind of in this, static place, but that they're constantly working on it. I think maybe I've told this before, the only truly leader who I've ever seen be really conscious in any given situation and not lose their consciousness was my mother, when she grandmothered the boys little. I would watch her sit on the floor and play with them, play Legos, or I'll never forget this one day. They were building with blocks and Legos, and Nana's sitting on the floor and Kieran's here and Riley's here. And they're building, and Riley grabs the Lego that Kieran wants, or Kieran grabs one that Riley wants. Whoever wanted, one of the boys got it. And the other one, the one took it and started building, and she watched. She was just so present. She watched as the other one rose up to go take that thing back.
Yeah.
And it was like the most masterful thing. She just grabbed him and hugged him and kissed him and said, "You're such a sweetheart. Let's go over here and get this block," and totally diverted him this way. And the whole conflict was gone. And I was like, that has got to be one of the most conscious moments I've ever seen. And her Nana antenna was up. She's like, this is going to be a problem. I better redirect the energy of
I
this
see
one,
this one.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really
Yeah.
remarkable.
That's the gift of grandparents, I think. They just have this wisdom that
Yeah,
they
the
bring.
wisdom and just full
Yeah.
presence,
Yeah.
that I think is pretty remarkable. The leader I was talking to this morning, one of the things he and I were discussing, and I really grabbed onto this word that he used. Um, he said, I think that where I'm at right now is about fine tuning the elements of my leadership. And he has a very high creative profile. And he's also someone who said, like, I knew that the reactive still needed to be available to us, right? To use that energy in the way that we wanted to. But this is about fine tuning. What are the moments in which I turn that on or use it in a creative way or use a totally different energy or juice to be even more integral, right? To actually use everything along the continuum. And I like that notion of fine tuning.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Fine tuning and reintegrating and staying conscious. I mean, I wonder for you, if you think about, um, disowned gifts, orphaned parts of ourself, or the stuff that we kind of gave away or left behind as we were sort of learning to get along and get ahead and, win respect and all of the things that are really important in that sort of early stages of our career. What for you has been something that you've been exploring how to bring back in more consciously, that maybe, you know, back when you were picking those hydrangeas for your wedding, would have been a little early. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you a story. It's actually just from yesterday. So for me, I think I've shared the story in my very first profile. Arrogance came up, but when I got more feedback, because I'd never really had that feedback in my leadership before, that I had an arrogant style, and usually it's pretty easy to see. I had the sneaky arrogance.
I remember.
And
Yeah.
sneaky arrogance is when you gently and softly let people know you'll just handle that for them. Like, oh gosh, you guys, this sounds like a pain. You know what? I'll handle it. Let me
I
take
got
it.
it.
I
Don't
got
worry
it.
about it.
And what that basically says is, I believe I can solve this and you can't, which is super arrogant, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I, probably because of disdain for the word, jettisoned that as quickly as I could. It was really hard because I also have that deep driven, and being like, oh, I've got it in this nice way, um, is it a really nice and easy way to mask driven arrogant. I've got it. I know I can do it. I know I can get it done. Um, and I'm maybe some of my teammates would say you actually didn't let go of much of that, but for me, I really, really did. Um,
Yeah.
and I watch very closely the way that, like, when I know I know the answer to something, I watch very closely the way that I operationalize it, the way that I use that. And yesterday I had a situation that I read some stuff that was going on, and it was like, no, 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 that's wrong. And I deployed, candidly, pretty arrogantly, and basically said, hey, I respectfully disagree. This is the way that I think that it is. This is the way that it looks like to me. And then I came back and I said, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I want to make sure my perspective is included. And the group was like, no, we're not taking this controversial or anything. We appreciate that. But it shut them down. So I noticed that. I was like, oh, that's not, I wanted to contribute what I knew, but spawn conversation. Now, there could be a host of reasons. Maybe they were busy, maybe they're out of the office, I don't know. So I came back to it. This is the fine tuning. I came back and said, I really meant for that to drive conversation. I know that sometimes my words can come out a little bit stronger. Like I intended this much and I gave this much, It's like, so, and then after I said that, then the whole conversation sparked. So that's one for me, is that the arrogant driven combo. It's a real gift. It's actually a power I have. So it's like, I don't want it to go
It
away, but
is. No,
I
I
need
mean,
it.
I've seen you do it,
Mhm.
and I think it's true, for you in particular, because of your role, which is both leading in the business, but also leading the work.
Yeah.
And so you carry a lot of authority, which
Yeah.
is not
Yeah.
just like, well, Betsy knows how to run a business, but that she doesn't know how to run a room,
Right.
in term,
Yeah.
but, or the other way around, right? Like, yeah, she's great with clients, but, she couldn't schedule herself out of a paper bag,
Yeah.
and
Which
you actually
actually
do
may be
both
true.
really well, which we're both sort of, no, but actually I think you have a real discernment and an
Uh,
instinct
and-
for both what would work for the business and what can work for the client. And I
uh-huh.
think as a result, it's more challenging for you because I think that discernment and that knowing can kind of override people very easily where they feel like, well, if Betsy thinks that,
Yeah.
like I don't know, I mean, I haven't been here for 10 years, sort of leading the business, and I mean, clearly she sees things I can't, and so I agree that sort of how do you hold, and it's something that I think for a lot of the very experienced leaders we work with, they struggle with, which is how do I take the wisdom and the hard-earned lessons
Yeah.
and be able to share those in the moment fully and transparently without, exactly like you said, it's shutting down other people's ideas. Because I'm not claiming that I know, but I do need to let you know what I know.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
can
And
we
like,
build from there, right? Rather than just it
1000%.
defaults it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I want to contribute what was hard. I really appreciate what you said, hard-earned knowledge. Like I want to contribute this
Yeah.
very hard-earned knowledge, and I want it to be unleashing and engaging for you. I
Yeah.
want you to say, "Oh, what if we took that and ran this way with it or that way with it?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
What's such a great way of thinking, because often that's the way we describe the the critical to courageous authenticity move is that it's sort of that discernment, that knowing, that hard-earned wisdom actually serves as a platform to build from, as opposed to sort of kind of a sledgehammer that moves things out of
yeah.
the way, right?
Yes,
And sort of,
yeah.
and it's a, even though that's not what we intend, it's so easy, like in those moments, to just, even with people, who are doing the work, and we're all trained in this stuff. I mean, it's not like we're not familiar with what's
Oh
going on, but
gosh.
boy, it's hard to navigate. Yeah,
It is really hard to navigate, and it's kind of the work of the life, right? Like that's the
it
work
really is.
of life. Um,
Yeah.
I would be curious for you. What about for you? What's one that you're kind of working on reintegrating?
Mine is a little different. So I think it probably stems from a childhood where, particularly early in the educational system, I have dyslexia, and at the time growing up and kind of you know outskirts of Boston, you're just slow. And so you get put into slow classes. There wasn't sort of a language for thinking about learning in different ways. And I think as a result of that early in life, I decided two things. One is stay distant, don't be seen, in a sense, like don't get called out because they're going to make you read out loud in class. And that would be super embarrassing. And then the other was, like, at least this was the story, you're not as smart as the other kids, so um like get out in front of it a little, like, and that's where the arrogance came in a little bit, like it was like my idea, like you kind of prove yourself constantly, right? Even though underneath that was probably a very self-conscious and insecure sense of like not knowing, so the best thing to do is just pretend I know. It helped, like, I mean, it got me through a lot. So, I mean, I have to sort of bow down and respect sort of the 8-year-old boy who decided this weird concoction of strategies to sort of navigate, because it managed to get me through life and into a good one.
Everything kind of
So,
worked out.
yeah, there probably was an easier path, but anyway, this is the one I was destined for. And I think the part that I'm trying to bring back in more is um, I've I often would get described, particularly later in the work, as like very humble and sort of I'd ask a lot of good questions. I studied anthropology, which is such a great way to stay on the periphery of systems. Like you're not, the rule number one is don't influence the system. So it's very easy to sort of be on the outside. And I think the part that I have struggled with, and I still do, is how do I bring myself in to the center? And how to, and you know this from just even our working relationship. Like it's, I'm sure, very easy for, like there can be one call where it feels like, wow, Paul's all in, and then it's like crickets. It's like, where do you,
I actually don't
you
have that
is he on
experience,
holiday?
but I know
You
others do.
others do, others do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you have less of it. So there's something about getting into the center, being vulnerable, the exposure that presents, the idea that you might be wrong, that you might not know the answer, these kinds of things. And, just playing safe gets exhausting. Maybe that's just a later in life kind of realization where you're just like, it doesn't really pay off very well,
Yeah.
and it's kind of more fun to get in there. So that's something that I've been working on. I'd say it's still, I think it'll always be work, you know, for me. Like I think reactive tendencies are like, it's just, I'm always trying to figure out what's the old me, the old strategy, and what's actually the gift that I want to carry from it, because they get collapsed so easily. And I'm very good at convincing myself that what I'm doing is absolutely the right thing, even though in hindsight, I'll think like, no, that was just you doing you. That wasn't helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? I have to just say, so just from my own perspective. So, and I told you this the last two calls we were on. There were two calls that I did not expect you to be on. They were well,
Oh,
the
right.
first one was actually like your content, but oftentimes you're not there. So I was like, and you were on the call, and I was like, Paul,
I
oh,
know that's
so happy you're here. And then the other
I'm,
one was yesterday, my call that you were on. And I was like, I
that's
can't believe
exactly.
you came.
I
And
was
so
like, I have to show up. Yeah.
I kind of, but I
So those
mentioned
are
that,
two good examples. So there you are, work
yeah.
in progress. See?
Well, it was
Yeah.
awesome, and what you contribute just by listening, like your thing, a part of your thing, which we'll talk about in a minute on Leadership Genius, but part of your thing is that you can listen to a whole bunch of things that are going on, goals, stuff that's happening, and know with great business wisdom what actually needs to happen, and laser beam like you did yesterday. You know exactly what I'm talking about when you're like, the way to do that, there's this way and there's this way. And it was like so helpful for me because I felt like I had this whole ball I was holding and it was like, what do we
Yeah.
do? And you just saw it. And as soon as you saw it, then I could see it. And so to
Hmm.
me, you giving that and pulling yourself back into that was great. And also me being able to say, oh, Paul came to the meeting and everyone was like, oh my gosh, that was so cool.
Exactly. The rare sighting
The rare sighting of Paul
of
Byrne
Paul.
in
Exactly.
a internal meeting. But
Oh, that's so fun.
but
Yeah.
I'm grateful for it, and I can see you playing that. And I also think some of that's from your writing, the work that you've been doing for the past couple
Mm,
of years on your blog and on LinkedIn,
yeah.
that
Yeah. That's sort of a
you've learned to
process
be
of kind
okay
of,
with it. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
which has been
Well,
great.
you mentioned leadership genius.
Yes.
So that was like one of the first thing when we were talking about a topic for today, I was like, oh, let's just talk about leadership genius. Tell me us about this idea, because I absolutely love it.
So, okay. So one of the things that I noticed in conversations with lots of our principals and our delivery associates
Hmm.
was that when you get a profile to look at, and um, when you start talking to that leader, you can see this like unique, beautiful thing about them. And it's not about their creative or their reactive, it's about their whole, right? And so it was like we get this moment to see this beautiful essence of a leader and then talk about how that's being deployed. What does that look like? What does your boss think? What does your boss's boss think? What do your peers think and your directs think? And how does that change? But at the core essence of it is people's this unique thing, and everybody's is a little different. Even if the profiles look similar, everybody's is a little different. So that was happening. And then Bob Anderson, one of our founders, did a video about the goal was never to shift reactively or creatively. The goal was to give more of your purpose out to the world. And when I watched him in this video, I was like, the language that we've used sometimes hasn't supported that. But then when he said that, I imagined this like bright light. It was like, it's to give more of your light to the world, however that needs to be done. And that's when I started playing with the glow ball that I now keep at the ready. Um, this concept that you have this unique, beautiful, incredible genius, and our job as coaches, as teammates, as people in the world with you is to help you know what that is, because sometimes it's hard to see your own, and then to unleash it so you get to give it more fully to the world. So then that was happening. And then you and I started playing with the business performance index data. And actually, that data, it doesn't show that the super high creative is the way to go. In fact, if you look at the top 10% highest performers in terms of leadership effectiveness and business performance, they do have a little bit of reactive stuff in there,
I
particularly
mean,
around
more than a
driven.
little in some areas,
Yeah,
right? I like
yeah,
things like driven
right.
and perfect, and yeah, a little bit of
So
ambition.
so
Yeah.
then I put kind of all that together and it was like, maybe our job in the world as leaders, as coaches, as teammates is to help see what somebody else's leadership genius is and then help them give that more fully. And if that's the job, feedback takes on a whole new form Feedback is, how do I give you information so you can unleash that beautiful genius, which sometimes has been bridled, right? You've had to
Yeah,
bridle
yeah.
it for different reasons. How do I help you give that in a way that is so pure that this beautiful light just shines through you and you can impact those around you and customers and or patients if they are, or, anyone that you're impacting. And that is what I've been playing with around leadership genius.
Well, I love I hadn't thought about it from a feedback standpoint, but I think you're right. Because even what would have maybe been characterized as slightly critical feedback, if it's really, no, this is just actually what gets in the way of the light coming out. Like,
That's
this is
right.
a way that like, I don't know that that you're
Yeah.
dimming it, because this
Right.
shows up. And then it's always for the sake of that brighter light in the
That's
world,
right.
as opposed to a critique on you in this meeting, or being sort of feeling like you're being judged or something.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a question for you.
Okay.
So if so let's imagine you're in a meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But like at a table, because
And
we're
I'm
all
in
in
like
virtual
my
meetings.
own meeting, I'm not coaching someone.
No. You're in your own meeting.
Okay.
Like, yeah, perfect. Good nuance. So you're in your own meeting. It's face-to-face meeting. And there's Betsy Leatherman being all sort of brilliant and doing her job. And there's a knock at the door, and in walks your leadership genius.
Oh gosh.
And that leadership genius is wearing a name tag. What do you think the name tag says?
That is such a good question. Um, I think it says energy, love, growth, and help or
It's your
assistance.
genius.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get it.
True.
You
Yeah.
get to decide.
And
That's not my
also,
genius, let me tell you.
okay,
Yeah.
got it.
It's
Okay,
clearly Betsy's genius.
yeah,
That makes sense. That resonates. Yeah.
I would also say, so there's something that I do that is like very practical and pragmatic,
Yeah.
but then also not at all.
Mm.
So, an example, we were having this session, it was going to be on a mountain, the road washed out. The team was like, "Oh my gosh, we have to find a new venue." And I was like, "Or just get helicopters." Like, I don't understand the challenge here. Get helicopters and we'll just helicopter everybody in. And they're like, "Well, what if people are afraid of flying?" I'm like, "Get horses." I don't know. Like, it's so easy because you've got to solve a problem. And I don't care how big it is that you solve it, because the goal is to get people to the session. That thing is, I think
Yeah.
that's part of what I bring.
It's interesting, because my experience of you in those kinds of meetings is, absent that leadership genius, you can go, like, no one can go into the details like you can. Like, you can go very, very micro into the details. You can also go super, super macro into, like, what if the whole business was about, and sort of this, I don't know, there's something in that genius that kind of reconciles those two, that
Yeah.
actually it's both are needed at the same time. The
Yeah.
sort of totally impractical, Betsy, what are you even on right now?
Yeah,
We're not going
exactly.
to get
We're
helicopters.
not getting
Uh,
helicopters.
and,
I'm like, yeah, we are.
like, but yeah, but something will come. And if it's not that, then, someone has a Jeep, and we'll figure out how to get
Totally.
everyone up there. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and
That's
I
so
understand
true.
what you're saying, because then I actually did say in the helicopter meeting, which has gone down as in the books, I'm like, we could even get like magnetic signs on the side of the helicopter with our logo. Like, wouldn't that be great?
And you've got a marketing thing. You could
I
write
would
it
have a
off.
full marketing campaign with it. Um, but my dad used to tell me when I was growing up, whenever you hit the end of the road, like whenever you hit the dead end, it's not actually a dead end. There's 3 magical doors, so look up, because you're about to be absolutely amazed by what's going to come next. So it's
Mm.
very fun and easy for me to be like, oh, helicopters, jeeps, horses, right? Because even if any of those are definitely not right, any of those are just something that opens someone up. That's all it's about, and so that's why it's super fun. It's also super
Or even
fun.
that you look. I mean, I cannot tell you how much So I remember you shared that with me years ago, and how often your dad's story comes into my head, because there is that sort of, what I love about it is it's not sort of cliche like, oh, you get to the end of the road and there'll be it'll be fine, or it's like you get stuck and somewhere there are three magic doors, but they're hidden. It's like, but you don't know where they are, but
Because
there's
you know you
always
better
three.
look.
Right, there's always three. And so it gets you curious, and you're like, I cannot tell you the number of times that voice has come in and been like, okay, where's the magic door? I really don't see any. And
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
start looking around and you're like, well, helicopters. That's one. It might not be the one we walk through, but that's definitely a
That's
door.
definitely a
Yeah,
possibility.
yeah. And it's been such great advice. So you please extend my thanks. He's gotten me unstuck more than a few times.
I will. And I have to tell you, you and I were talking about this concept of can you see your own leadership genius? And you had said, I think it's really hard for people to do that. It is. That was a really hard question because I had not prepared for it at all.
Yeah, I
So,
knew, I just kind of asked it out of I was just curious what you come up with, but it was actually a
yeah,
really good answer.
that's really hard though. That's very interesting. And I've been thinking about it a lot. And so I'm like putting myself in our clients' shoes of they hadn't necessarily thought about that. How do you do that? And one of the ways we talked about was a pairing and a little anthropological work. But before we go there, I have to ask you same question. So
Oh God,
your
that's what I was
leadership
afraid of.
genius, I know you didn't want me to do it, but I have to. So
No, no, this is not good for my high distance. I should have probably expected this and already worked up
and
an
thought
answer, but
through
I
it.
was
Yeah.
too, I was listening about this. So three doors, three doors. Um, mine would probably say, help me stay in the room.
Mm,
Like there's like that's what would be written, like that's like instructions for use. Like if this is helpful, you're going to have to help it stay in, because its instinct is going to be to leave, or to drop a little something and then leave. And so I always, in fact, that meeting that you mentioned yesterday, um, Karen, who's a colleague of ours, I think I sent her a text, or we might have been talking, and I said, do you think I should go to the meeting? And she knows me well enough to not be like, oh, you definitely need to go, because then I definitely wouldn't go. But she was like, yeah, no, I think you really should. And, I think your perspective is going to be helpful. And I think Betsy could use that. Like, that's all I needed to hear was like,
yeah.
Betsy could use some
Somebody
help.
needs
And I'm
you.
like, okay, I'm
Betsy
there,
needs you.
So there is something about like, yeah, that would be kind of the instruction for use, help. If this is helpful, help it stay, because it,
Yeah.
it still wants to run. And, I don't necessarily want to, but it's just, sometimes those old scripts, they come back in 57 years old, and we're still playing,
Yeah. Still playing the
it's
scripts.
still running.
But
Yeah.
okay, I would add some things to your genius. And I think I don't, and I'm sure your clients get this too, but as your coworkers, like your teammate, your humor and making light in very serious situations and holding things lightly and making things lightly, but also then being very serious at the same time is such a relief to me, and just also just is fun. It's just really
Hmm.
fun. Like I
Oh, thank
will
you.
have an experience some days, like even in Barcelona when I was like not doing any work, I was like, oh, I totally need to text this to Paul right now. He would die. He would
I
laugh
know.
so hard. So like just
Yeah.
your
Oh,
ability
that's
to,
that's very, very nice to hear. Yeah. Thank you very
yeah,
much.
I think
Yeah.
that's very cool. And
Yeah.
then there's something very um inspirational about your deep passion and commitment to the field. Like deeply passionate, deeply committed, but also and maybe your distance thing allows you to hold it lightly. Maybe
There might
there's
be.
something in that allows you to be like this incredible contributor, which I know you hate when I even say, but like incredible thought leader, but also be like totally fine in a moment or be able to talk about a hotel buffet or lack thereof,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Well, yeah, we won't go there.
But yeah, there's something about that as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's always nice to hear, and useful. So yeah, I appreciate it. Well, maybe we could sort of end or start to wrap up with some advice or practices or ideas that we could give to anyone else who's perhaps working on this idea of identifying their leadership genius. Like, how do I even know what that is? And B, how do I start to experiment with bringing it in more fully? And hopefully from this conversation, people get that even if you've worked at the heart of adult development and have surrounded by people who are among the best in the field, it's like we're still figuring it out too,
We're
right?
still
I
working
might
through
sort
this
of run
one.
out of the room and you're I don't know what helicopters, but so it's not easy. It's always a work in progress. I always think to where you started this conversation, which is it's always about this constant recovery to consciousness. Am I being conscious in this moment? And of course, not every moment you are. And I always think often the trick is just can you shorten the lag time between being unconscious and recovering? So the advice that I've been giving around this is, and you've already actually mentioned part of it earlier in the conversation, which is you're not going to think your way out of it. It's like I could probably write your name tag better than you can think of your name tag. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm sure if you ask 20 people who work with you, what would Betsy's unique genius, leadership genius name tag say? I bet that'd be like
They could give it to you.
significant alignment,
Yeah.
you know, right? And you'd be like, oh. So that, the first thing is this is a relational move.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an intellectual move. This isn't I'll go away for a weekend and read a book or I'll, take a long walk and think about it. You're not going to think your way into it. I think, frankly, if you could, you probably would have already, because you're getting into kind of some of the nuances of leadership. And so I think if you can get to, particularly in an organizational context, peers
Mm-hmm.
and just ask, I mean, quite frankly, the simple question of what's a quality that you've come to recognize in me that you think I don't most fully bring in the service of what we're trying to do? In other words, like what's the dial that you'd invite me to turn up for the sake of the outcomes that matter? That you think maybe you don't even know you have that dial. Like, and people are always surprised by it. It's like, oh, we love your kind of disruptive idea, and actually we need more of that at the moment. That sort of counterintuitive, kind of contrarian thinking, whatever it is. So I think of it as like go out there almost like an anthropologist would and interview people around what that leadership genius might be. And you can decide what language you want to use for it. We're using leadership genius. I could think it could be sort of this untapped potential or
Mm-hmm. It
this
could be
aspect of my leadership or the
leadership
energy that I bring that
contribution.
could really contribute. And, I've seen there's a lot of talk around, and especially in our space and in our industry, the power of AI. And I think we've all seen it's kind of miraculous in some ways in terms of being able to integrate lots of data. I think it's going to play a big role in how people grow and develop. And I think, like anything, there's a tendency towards over-indexing on the new shiny thing. And if I had a both and wish, it's absolutely get the best from your technology, but don't use the technology as a proxy for relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your large language model is not in relationship with you. Your
Mm-hmm.
CFO is. And
Yes.
maybe you're not the best of friends, but you're two human beings that are in relationship. There's going to be
Yeah.
a different set of data and knowing that comes
Yeah.
from that source that couldn't possibly come from, at least at this point where technology sits. So, get out there, have conversations. You'd be surprised at how much the people around you know about what you could bring more of. And you can always disagree and not do it. But my experience is people are usually both surprised and maybe a little bit like the two of us today, kind of secretly sort of pleased with it. Like there's kind of I suspect that leadership genius, there's probably a part of us that suspects there's something special about it, and we don't quite have the courage to admit it to ourselves. And when someone else sort of holds it up and says, this is actually a pretty special part of you, it's like, yeah, I could fall in love with that again. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and I
Yeah.
also think once you learn to see yours and you help others see theirs, the next move is like you got to make sure your team knows theirs, right? Like I want everybody that's on my team to know what their unique leadership genius is. And actually, as all of ours come together, I think we all probably have a team leadership genius that changes when you move people in or out. And what is that? And then how do we wrap that thing up? What are the ways that we take it reactively and keep the light too dim? And I think that to me is kind of the next element of that conversation. And the one thing I just want to add on to what you said, I've just recently read an article about intellectualization as a barrier to relationship. That when people intellectualize too much, it's actually like a unintentional defense mechanism to not build relationship. And so I think the leadership move is to ask yourself in a moment, am I trying to intellectualize this or am I trying to make this relational? And this one is absolutely relational.
I think let's end it there. Beautiful. Thank you, Betsy.
Thank
Welcome
you,
back
Paul.
from Spain. Welcome back to
Welcome back for the
all
fall.
that was waiting for you and
We have
your
a big
hydrangeas. And yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.